Who has ever given a media interview or interview to the media? Okay, well, quite a lot. Okay, who had a positive experience with media? Well, most have had negative. Who had negative experience with the media? Who has ever been quoted out of context in their interview? Quite a few people. Okay. Working with the media is quite sensitive, and there is many sensitivities there. There is a reputational risk. There is a professional risk. So, of course, when you think about an outbreak, it's going to be newsworthy. If there's a new outbreak, which we didn't have before. I mean, think of Ebola, a recent outbreak. It was really newsworthy. The whole media was talking about it. Now, when you talk about polio and compare polio and Ebola, the magnitude, yeah, the thousands of people are dying, thousands of people getting cases every day, and then you have one case in South Sudan or one case in Ethiopia or Syria. So what? Syria has other risks, right? There are thousands of children which are displaced, they're refugees. So we need to think about the agenda, the agenda and the salience of the issue in the media in the broader terms. We're talking about the big media players, CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera, RT, and any other huge networks which establish and set the global agenda. It's likely the spin or the framing which will be taken in the media around outbreak would be mostly around program viability. So yes, there probably won't be so many, thousands of cases or hundreds of cases, but the questions that media probably will be asking is why 26 years down the line, after billions of dollars having spent on the polio program, we still have an outbreak. So these are kind of questions or frames that we may face in the media. National and international media interest, of course, it depends on the complexity. Especially this is more even true in the complex humanitarian situations. If you think of Middle East outbreak, you had a major operation going on there, and you have ISIS, which is another media sort of agenda. Then you have Somalia and terrorist groups and attacks. So it's all interlinked. So polio can be easily caught up and politicized and intervened in those issues. So therefore, it is extremely sensitive, and even so more important to properly establish facts, what is actually happening on the ground. There is another part to it, which is mainly in-country external relations. And that is something where there is an outbreak, and we use media and the journalists and the natural interest which is there to garner support and to create an enabling environment for the campaign. So something that is happening internally within the country, of course, can be managed within the country. Nonetheless, the key lines and key messages to the media should still be agreed and coordinated with the global partnership. So there are several scenarios. When there is an outbreak, and if there is a new case, how do we communicate to the media? How do public find out about the case? So there are two possible scenarios. One is the WHO first identifies and reports new polio cases through official channels, and there is a certain protocol for that. And B, sometimes media first to announce the case even before the official confirmation is there. VDPV is even more problematic when it comes to managing external communication. And given the situation that we are more likely to see more VDPVs than WPVs, I think it's even more critical, and we are prepared to respond to that. Now, VDPV is an extremely technical issue, and it's very easy to mishandle media response to vaccine-derived polio case. It's easy to handle VDPV when you are in endemic country because you have ongoing campaigns, the virus there. But if you have suddenly, out of the blue, you have a VDPV in the country X, it's very much newsworthy, and people would be interested, media would be interested, where did the virus come from? How did it appear? So of course, the vaccine-derived part, we normally downplay, but we really talk about the need to strengthen routine immunization. And of course, there are certain key messages which are there. I don't want to stop much on them. Any new poliovirus case, and these are the global messages I'm talking about, that any new poliovirus case is a reminder that until we eradicate polio, there's always risk of those recurring outbreaks. Along the same lines, it's important to reassure the donors and reassure the public that the Global Polio Eradication Initiative is very much capable, has the capacity to deliver timely, aggressive, and efficient response to any outbreak. And we have already good examples, in the history. We have some recent examples in Middle East and the Horn of Africa. These are the two people who we should contact in case you guys are faced with the media. Now, normally, within any country, within the UNICEF team, you would have external communication specialists and even probably the team. And these guys know how to handle and how to manage media. And it's what we've seen from previous experiences in outbreaks is if there is a WHO communication officer, UNICEF communication officer, they sit together, the technical team which is on the ground would work with them, they would liaison then with these our two colleagues, so we will coordinate the response. In the recent outbreak response in South Sudan and Madagascar, VDPV, the question and answers were already adjusted and fed from two headquarters to us on the ground, and it was very useful because we knew that these are the lines that we take with the media, they were the talking points, and these are the lines that were given to the government. And we briefed the government also. Now we're coming into the area of internal communication. So how do we communicate internally? What we have at the outbreak scenarios is a situation that is extremely dynamic. I mean, it's just evolving, every day, several times a day. So something, some information which you have as of today, it will be outdated tomorrow, maybe even by the evening. So it's important that we keep the latest information, we keep all of the partnership informed. So it's important that the situation reports actually include all of these components. And normally you would have a weekly situation reports in the outbreak scenario. And of course, the sooner you start doing this, the better. And very often, I cannot reiterate more, is the synergy and the convergence between the EPI team, basically immunization team and the communication team. They need to be together. That CTRAP needs to be a joint CTRAP. I want to give you one example, just this one slide, of the outbreak in the Horn of Africa. And this was a massive 2-year outbreak in the 3 countries, which had several more countries around it. So Somalia, Kenya, and Ethiopia. So in 2013, we had over 200 cases. As you can see, huge start, just increases, and then a very, very, very long tail. So this was in 2014, just 5 cases, no cases this year. So this is how the outbreak really evolved and developed. Yeah. So it's really much, in terms of communication, I have a question. What implication it has to communication? So what we have seen in the outbreak response is that one of the major tasks or one of the major objectives and strategies in the very beginning of the outbreak, in the first few weeks, is the immediate amplification of risk of polio, because we want to sensitize everybody, we want to increase the sense of urgency to respond to the case. We want to mobilize the partners, so it's very important that all our communication is geared around that. So this is how we communicate, whether you're talking about the media. This is also would be reflecting of the number of media articles that you would get. Once you have an outbreak, you have increase, huge increase in the media coverage. Similarly, when you're talking about the C4D component, social mobilization, you would start talking about that particular child or that particular family. And you'd be talking about, polio true story, where a mother would be speaking about how devastated she is to see her child paralyzed. Just one of the communication methods, for example, that could be used. You'd be probably showing some of the maybe even disturbing images or products where you see paralyzed children. You're talking about that we need to mobilize and act together. So that's the first approach. The next one, when the case is going more under control, and when you would see more cases, you would see a feeling of reassurance and control in the public. So public you would probably see the first signs of fatigue, the first signs of refusals. Why so many campaigns? You've got 5 campaigns, you've got 10 campaigns going on. So people will start asking the questions. And of course, your communication would be reflective of that. Now, what's important to say that at least in the first stage, similar to operation, you don't really care whether the quality is fantastic. So when you have an outbreak, what you need to do, you need to deploy available communication resources immediately. So maybe your public service announcement on the radio will not be as creative. Or maybe it will not be as your posters may not be as fantastic, and maybe just an information. Your social mobilizers may not even be trained, but they would have some basic key messages that say, these are the campaign days, you've got the polio virus, get your children immunized. So that's how it's going to be. Now further, as you develop your program, you would see that, at this time you would have more resources, you have Team B in place, and you'd be able to calibrate your program to make, to adjust it. For example, you start talking about mobile population. Oh, we keep missing pastoralists. So what kind of communication tools and strategies we'd use to address them? So that's the next stage. And the last stage, where you have a long tail, it's like business as usual. Like last year in Horn of Africa, this was a bit critical, where there's no more polio, or almost no polio. So how do we keep that momentum? How do we keep persuading people again and again and again? I mean, Somalia has done 14 campaigns. So far from 2013 and even more. So how do we keep that? How do we keep them going? I don't have an answer for that. I mean, we're still working on that. I mean, there are different methods that we use, but the bottom line is that this is where we need to be. We need to try to sustain that momentum, and that's the objective of communication. But it's also a challenge.